Brittany Carver, Mesa Police. Keep your hands where I can see them.
What is this? I just arrived for my shift. What?
For months, people trusted Brittany Nicole Carver alone inside the home of a 79-year-old Alzheimer's patient. What she did with that trust, piece by piece, is what ended her freedom.
$15,000 in jewelry stolen from your Alzheimer's patient by pawning her wedding rings and anniversary pieces.
I'm a home health aide. I take care of her
This
properly.
is insane.
The records told the whole story. 42 pawn shop tickets across 6 shops in the Phoenix metro area, each one signed in her own handwriting, each one filed with her driver's license photograph attached, each one logged on a date that lined up exactly with a shift she had worked inside the home of a 79-year-old widow with Alzheimer's disease. The woman in this footage had counted on a victim who could not remember and would not be believed. She had not counted on the daughter who came home for a long weekend, opened her mother's jewelry box, and decided, for the first time in 2 years, to believe what her mother had been trying to tell her. Quick question before we go any further. Have you ever trusted someone to take care of an aging parent or grandparent inside their own home? A nurse, an aide, a companion, a housekeeper? Drop a comment and tell me how you vetted them, or whether you wish you had vetted them harder. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is the moment to hit that button. This channel covers the cases your local news lets disappear after one 20-second segment. We don't let them disappear. Brittany Nicole Carver was born in Glendale, Arizona in the spring of 1995. Her mother worked as a certified medical assistant at a family practice clinic on West Bell Road, the kind of clinic where the lobby televisions played the same daytime talk show on loop, and the regulars all knew the receptionist by her first name. Her father drove long-haul freight for a company out of Phoenix, hauling produce and refrigerated loads between distribution centers in Texas, New Mexico, and California, and he came home for roughly 1 weekend a month. The Carver family lived in a beige stucco rental off North 51st Avenue, a 2-bedroom unit with a small concrete patio, a single saguaro in the front yard, and a swamp cooler on the roof that struggled every July. Brittany was the older of 2 children. Her younger brother arrived when she was 7, and her earliest memories of being useful in the world were tied to him. Warming bottles, walking him to the bathroom in the middle of the night, sitting with him on the couch in front of a muted television while their mother worked a double at the clinic. By the time Brittany was 12, her mother routinely left her in charge of the apartment after school until the dinner hour. Neighbors who would later speak to detectives described her with a particular consistency: quiet, responsible, polite to a fault. One woman who lived 2 doors down said Brittany had once carried her groceries up 2 flights of stairs in an August afternoon without being asked, and had refused the $5 bill the woman tried to press into her hand on the way back down. She attended Greenway High School. Her transcript was unremarkable. B's in English and history, C's in math, 1 A in a health occupations elective her junior year. A guidance counselor's note from that same year described her as soft-spoken, dependable, and self-sufficient. She did not play sports. She did not go to homecoming. She worked weekend shifts at a frozen yogurt shop on West Thunderbird Road for $6.50 an hour. She graduated in May of 2013 with no specific plans and no money for the in-state tuition rate at the closest community college. Her mother suggested nursing. Brittany compromised. She enrolled 3 weeks after graduation in a 6-week certified nursing assistant course at a strip mall vocational school off West Peoria Avenue. 3 nights a week, 90 minutes per session. The course covered transfers, vital signs, pericare, basic safety, and the long, slow patience required to coax a meal into a body that no longer wanted to eat. She passed the state competency exam on her first attempt. Her clinical instructor wrote, on her final evaluation, that she was calm under pressure, gentle with patience, and showed real aptitude for geriatric care. She took her first CNA position in late 2013 at a long-term care facility in Sun City, working the overnight shift on a dementia floor for $10.85 an hour. She stayed there for nearly 3 years. Co-workers later told investigators that she was the one who would actually sit with a resident through a sundown spiral instead of waiting it out behind the nurses' station with the rest of them. Her supervisor's annual review from 2015 called her detail-oriented, reliable, and showing strong potential for advancement into a charge aide role. She met Tyler in 2016 at a 24-hour diner where she used to eat breakfast after her overnight shifts. He worked HVAC installation for a company out of Tempe. They moved in together within 4 months. Her son Logan was born in November of 2017 at Banner Thunderbird Medical Center. The relationship ended 6 months after that in a slow, quiet way. Tyler took a job in Tucson, drove down on a Sunday night, and never quite came back. The child support payments came in on time for the first year. Then they started arriving late, then sporadically, then not at all. Brittany moved with Logan into a 1-bedroom apartment in a complex called Sycamore Springs on East University Drive in Mesa. The rent was $975 a month. The complex had a pool that was half broken for most of the year, a laundry room with 3 of its 5 washers out of service, and a parking lot where the streetlights flickered at random. She traded the overnight shift for daytime hours so she could pick Logan up from a state-subsidized daycare on East Broadway Road by 5:30 each evening. She took a position with a Phoenix area in-home care agency in early 2020, a company called Sonoran Pathways Home Care, an outfit that contracted with families and with a handful of long-term care insurance plans to provide non-medical companion care, light housekeeping, meal preparation, and medication reminders to elderly clients in their own homes. The pay was $15.50 an hour. The hours were predictable. The drives between clients were unpaid. Mileage was reimbursed at 31 cents a mile, and she logged it on a paper sheet she kept clipped to the visor of her 2014 Nissan Sentra. Her early evaluations at Sonoran Pathways were strong. Clients liked her. An elderly man with Parkinson's specifically requested her after his wife passed, telling the agency she was the only one of them who actually listened. She received the company's Employee of the Quarter recognition twice in 2022. She was given longer assignments, harder cases, the families that other aides had quietly declined to return to. The agency considered her one of their best. In early June of 2024, the agency's scheduling coordinator added a new name to her case list: a 79-year-old widow in Mesa, moderate-stage Alzheimer's, lives alone, daughter primary contact, out of state. To understand what happened inside Eleanor Whitfield's home that summer, you have to first understand how in-home elder care actually works in Arizona, and how thin, in practice, the layer of oversight really is. In-home care is the fastest-growing segment of the long-term care industry in the United States. The math is simple, and the math is brutal. A memory care facility in the Phoenix metro area in 2024 ran families between $6,000 and $9,000 a month, every month, with no end date. A part-time in-home aide for the same family ran roughly $2,000. For middle-class families trying to keep an aging parent in their own home for as long as possible, the choice is not really a choice at all. It is made for them by the price tag. In Arizona, the agencies themselves are required to be licensed by the State Department of Health Services. The individual aides who work for those agencies are not licensed in the same professional way. They must complete a state-approved training program, typically between 75 and 120 hours of instruction, and they must pass what is called a Level 1 fingerprint clearance card check, which screens applicants for felony convictions and a defined list of disqualifying misdemeanors. They are not required to be bonded. They are not required to carry their own individual liability insurance. They are not subject to ongoing professional review by any state licensing board the way a registered nurse would be. The agency that placed Brittany Carver in Eleanor Whitfield's home, Sonoran Pathways, did exactly what state law required of it, and not one step more. They ran the fingerprint check. It came back clean. They verified her CNA certification through the state registry. It was current. They confirmed 2 professional references from her years in long-term care. Both were positive. They issued her a laminated photo ID badge with her name, her photograph, and the agency logo, and they sent her into the home of a vulnerable adult 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, with a single brass house key on a small silver carabiner. Once the aide is inside the home, there is no surveillance. No supervisor drops in unannounced. No camera in the bedroom. No camera at the front door. The agency requires a daily check-in note in a smartphone app. Meals served, medications reminded, mood observed, any incidents. But the note is written by the aide about the aide's own visit, with no second pair of eyes in the room to verify it. The only review of the arrangement that actually happens comes from the family, and the family, in most cases, is somewhere else. Eleanor Whitfield's daughter, Margaret, lived in Denver. She managed her mother's care from 1,000 miles away. She paid Sonoran Pathways through automatic monthly billing on a credit card that auto-renewed. She read Brittany's daily app notes when she had time, which was usually on her commute or in bed at night. She trusted, because she had to, that the woman with the badge was who the badge said she was, and that the agency had done its job in placing her. That is the system in 2024 in the state of Arizona, and in roughly 48 other states with only minor variations. A clean background check, a laminated badge, a locked front door, and on the other side of that door, a 79-year-old woman who could no longer reliably remember whether she had eaten lunch. Eleanor Whitfield, Ellie, to anyone who had ever loved her, had lived in the same single-story ranch house on East Inglewood Street in Mesa since the late summer of 1972. She and her husband, Walter, a civil engineer who spent his entire 41-year career with the Salt River Project, had bought the house for $41,000 in cash and a small Veterans Affairs loan when their daughter Margaret was 3 years old. They raised her in that house. They hosted Easter dinners in the dining room and 4th of July barbecues in the backyard and a 50th anniversary party in the front living room with a sheet cake and 42 of their closest friends. Walter died of a stroke in the spring of 2019. Ellie, then 74 years old and not yet diagnosed with anything, decided to stay in the house. The Alzheimer's diagnosis came in early 2022. It started, as it almost always does, as mild cognitive impairment, forgotten appointments, repeated questions on the same phone call, the slow, almost invisible shrinking of a vocabulary that had once won her 2 consecutive league championships at the local bridge club. By the summer of 2024, she was in what her neurologist called the moderate stage. She could still dress herself most mornings. She could still recognize her daughter on a video call. She could not reliably remember what day of the week it was. She could not remember whether she had taken her morning medications without checking the plastic pill dispenser on the kitchen counter. She could not always remember whether she had eaten breakfast, and she could not, with any certainty, remember whether she had taken her own gold bracelet out of her jewelry box that particular morning, or whether someone else had. Brittany Carver was assigned to the Whitfield case on June 17, 2024. The intake paperwork described Ellie in clinical, almost flat language. Moderate stage Alzheimer's, ambulatory, no fall risk, no behavioral concerns, lives alone, daughter primary contact, out of state. The first week, Brittany did exactly what the agency had hired her to do, and she did it well. She arrived each weekday at 9 in the morning. She made oatmeal with sliced banana on the days Ellie wanted it, and scrambled eggs with toast on the days she didn't. She walked Ellie through the medication checklist taped to the side of the refrigerator: Donepezil, Memantine, a low-dose statin, a blood pressure pill, a daily multivitamin. She watered the potted geraniums on the back patio. She vacuumed the living room. She sat on the brown floral couch with Ellie and watched the 11 o'clock news. She left at 3. The jewelry box was on the dresser in the master bedroom. Brittany would have walked past it on her first day when she helped Ellie change the sheets. She would have walked past it on her second day when she put away a load of laundry. By the end of the first week, she would have known exactly what was inside it. It was a small cedar box with a brass clasp and a tiny lock that had not actually worked for 15 years. Inside it, arranged in velvet-lined compartments, was the visible record of a 50-year marriage. Ellie's wedding ring, set with a small round diamond and 2 channel-set sapphires. Walter's gold wedding band, which she had kept on the right side of the box after he died. A gold tennis bracelet he had given her for their 25th anniversary, tucked into a small jeweler's pouch from a store on East Camelback Road that had been out of business for a decade. A strand of cultured pearls from their honeymoon trip to San Diego in the summer of 1969. 2 cameo brooches that had belonged to Ellie's mother, a Pennsylvania schoolteacher who had died in 1981. An emerald and gold cocktail ring Walter had given her for their 40th anniversary in front of 30 people at a steakhouse in Scottsdale. There was also a second, less obvious cache. A small ceramic dish on the top shelf of the bedroom closet, set behind 2 folded sweaters where Ellie kept the pieces she had stopped wearing in her 70s, 3 pairs of clip-on earrings, a small jade pendant, a heavy gold signet ring her father had worn every day of his adult life. The first piece Brittany took was the jade pendant. Investigators would later reconstruct the timeline from the pawnshop records with almost surgical precision. July 11, 2024, a Thursday. A pawnbroker at a shop called Desert Gold Exchange on East Main Street in Mesa accepted a jade pendant on a flat-rate consignment for $60 in cash. The transaction was signed, photographed, and filed under the name Brittany N. Carver, with her Arizona driver's license number entered into the system, and her photograph captured at the counter by a wall-mounted camera. The pendant matched, exactly, a piece visible in an insurance appraisal photograph from 2018 that Margaret Whitfield Donovan had kept in a manila folder in her Denver home office. She did not take another piece for 9 days. When she did, it was a single clip-on earring from a pair, not both. The missing half of a pair, in a dish of items Ellie no longer wore, was a calculated bet that no one would ever notice the asymmetry. No one did. The pace accelerated through August. A pair of small gold hoop earrings on August 7th. The signet ring on August 14th. one of the cameo brooches on August 22nd. By the end of August, Brittany had pawned 7 items at 4 different shops: Desert Gold Exchange in Mesa, Apache Trail Pawn out in Apache Junction, Cash America on East McDowell Road in Phoenix, and a smaller independent on West Main Street called Sun Valley Pawn. She never took 2 items in the same week to the same shop. She rotated, she was patient, she was professional about it. In September, she became bolder. She took the gold tennis bracelet on September 3rd. She took the strand of pearls on September 10th. She took the emerald cocktail ring on September 18th. On at least 2 separate occasions in late summer, Ellie said something. Not loudly, not insistently. She told Brittany, in passing on a Tuesday afternoon, that she could not find her mother's brooch and wondered if maybe Brittany had moved it during cleaning. Brittany said she would look. She mentioned it again to Margaret on a Sunday phone call in early September, that her jewelry box looked emptier than it should. Margaret, on the phone from Denver while making dinner for her teenage son, told her mother gently that she had probably just moved them and forgotten where. Ellie agreed that this was probably what had happened. The conversation ended. Margaret did not write it down. Brittany, who was standing in the kitchen loading the dishwasher and listening to one side of the call, did. In the notes app on her phone, that same afternoon, she added a line to a running list she had started in July. The list, when detectives would later pull it from her phone under a warrant, contained 6 entries, each one a date, each one an item, each one a price. She was keeping a ledger. She was keeping it on the device she carried in her pocket through Ellie Whitfield's house every single day. By the first week of October 2024, Brittany had pawned 16 pieces. She had received approximately $3,200 in cash. The pieces themselves were valued, on the most recent insurance appraisal, at roughly $15,000. She had spent most of the cash on her rent, on her car payment, on Logan's daycare, and on the slowly accruing balance of a payday loan she had taken out in May to cover a brake pad repair. She had one more shift scheduled at the Whitfield home for the second week of October. She did not get the chance to work it. Margaret Whitfield Donovan flew into Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport on the afternoon of Friday, October 4th, 2024. She rented a Toyota Camry at the Hertz counter and drove the 23 minutes east on the 202 to her mother's house in Mesa. She had not been back to Arizona since early August. She had told her mother on the phone 3 different times that she was coming for a long weekend to attend her nephew's wedding. She had not told her mother that she had been quietly worried since the September phone call about the jewelry box. She brought groceries from a Fry's on East Southern Avenue. She brought a suitcase, and she brought a printed copy of the most recent insurance appraisal of her mother's jewelry, which she had pulled up on her laptop 2 nights earlier in Denver and printed at the FedEx office near her house, because something in her mother's voice on that September call had stayed with her in a way she could not quite shake loose. Saturday morning, October 5th, Margaret began preparing her mother for the family event she had flown in for, her brother's son's wedding, a 6:30 ceremony at a vineyard venue in Scottsdale. She helped her mother dress. She picked out a navy blouse and a string of small pearls. Costume, not the real ones. And she asked in the casual, drifting voice you use with someone who startles easily, where the good pearls were. Ellie said she thought they were in the box. Margaret opened the cedar box on the dresser. The pearls were not there. The tennis bracelet was not there. The wedding ring, the small round diamond, and the 2 channel set sapphires that Walter had picked out at a jewelry counter in 1968 was not there. Margaret sat down on the edge of her mother's bed. She did not say anything for almost a full minute. Her mother, who had watched her open the box and was standing barefoot on the carpet in a navy blouse and a half-buttoned skirt, said quietly, with a clarity that startled her daughter, I told you they were missing." It was the most coherent thing Ellie had said in 3 days. Margaret took out her phone. She photographed the empty velvet compartments in the cedar box. She photographed the dresser top. She walked to the bedroom closet, opened the door, took down the small ceramic dish from the top shelf, and photographed what was left inside it. 2 clip-on earrings, neither of them part of a pair, and a single jade-colored thread caught in the felt liner where the pendant had been. She matched what was missing against the printed insurance appraisal, line by line, item by item. She made a list. By the end of that first morning, the list had 11 entries. By the end of the day, after a second, slower search of the bedroom, the bathroom medicine cabinet, and the dining room sideboard, the list had 19. She drove her mother to the wedding. She smiled in the family photographs on the lawn outside the vineyard. She sat through dinner with her hands folded in her lap. She left her mother with a cousin at the reception around 9:30, walked out to the gravel parking lot, sat in the rented Camry, and called the after-hours line for Sonoran Pathways Home Care. The agency's on-call coordinator listened. She apologized. She promised an internal review starting first thing Monday morning. She used the word concerning 4 times in the conversation. Margaret listened. She thanked her. She hung up. She drove the 23 minutes back across town to her mother's house, sat down at the kitchen table with the printed appraisal and her phone full of photographs and the handwritten list of 19 missing items, and she dialed the non-emergency number for the Mesa Police Department instead. A patrol officer arrived at the house at 10:47 that night. He took an initial report. He looked at the photographs on her phone. He looked at the appraisal. He listened to Margaret describe her mother's diagnosis, the 4-month tenure of the assigned caregiver, the dates of her last visit, and the September phone call she now wished she had taken more seriously. He told her, before he left, that the department's property crimes unit ran pawn shop database searches as a matter of routine in cases that looked like this one. He told her not to expect anything for at least a few weeks. The first pawn database match came back on Monday morning. Detective Aaron Ruiz of the Mesa Police Department's Property Crimes Unit picked up the case file on the morning of Monday, October 7th, 2024. He had been a property detective for 9 years. He had worked elder exploitation cases before. He had worked roughly 40 of them. The first thing he did before he made a single phone call was open the Leads Online portal on his desktop and run the photographed pieces from Margaret Donovan's insurance appraisal through the law enforcement-only pawn transaction database. Arizona state law requires every licensed pawnbroker in the state to log each individual transaction within 24 hours of accepting an item. The log includes a description of the item, a photograph of it, the seller's full legal name, the seller's driver's license number, the seller's signature, the seller's thumbprint, and a photograph of the seller captured at the moment of sale by a counter-mounted camera. The records sit in the Leads Online system for years. They are searchable by item, by seller, by date, by zip code, and by partial description. The first match took 11 minutes to come back. A jade pendant, logged on July 11th, 2024, at Desert Gold Exchange on East Main Street in Mesa, accepted for $60 in cash, sold by a 29-year-old white female named Brittany Nicole Carver, driver's license number on file, photograph attached. Ruiz pulled up the photograph from the transaction. It was a young woman in a navy blue agency scrubs top, light brown hair tied back in a ponytail, no smile, looking directly at the counter camera with the flat, mildly resigned expression of a person performing an errand she had performed before. The second match came back within the hour. A heavy gold signet ring, accepted at Apache Trail Pawn out in Apache Junction on August 14th for $240. Same seller, same driver's license number, same photograph at a different counter. The third match, a gold tennis bracelet at Cash America on East McDowell Road in Phoenix on September 3rd, $610 in cash. The fourth, the fifth, the sixth. By the end of that afternoon, Detective Ruiz had matched 14 of the 19 missing pieces to pawn transactions logged at 6 different shops across the Phoenix metro area over the previous 4 months. Every single transaction bore the same name. Every single transaction carried the same signature. Every single transaction had a counter photograph of the same woman in the same navy blue agency scrubs. Ruiz contacted Sonoran Pathways the next morning. He spoke with the agency's compliance officer, a woman named Janet Ortiz, who had been with the company for 7 years. He asked her to pull the assigned aide history for the Whitfield case. Ortiz pulled it. She confirmed that Brittany Nicole Carver had been the assigned aide for Eleanor Whitfield since June 17, 2024, and that she had worked, on average, 4 to 5 shifts per week, each shift running roughly 6 hours. Ortiz pulled the digital shift records and emailed them to Ruiz within the hour. Ruiz placed the shift records next to the pawn transaction dates on his desk. He went through them line by line, date by date. Every single pawn date, every one of the 42 transactions across the 6 shops, fell either on a confirmed shift day or within 48 hours of one. Several of the transactions had been logged within 90 minutes of the end of her shift, on a direct geographic line between the Whitfield home on East Inglewood Street and her apartment complex on East University Drive. Detectives visited 4 of the 6 pawn shops in person over the following week. They recovered Ellie's wedding band, the small round diamond and the 2 channel-set sapphires, from a back room at Sun Valley Pawn on West Main Street, still sealed inside the manila envelope it had been placed in for the state-mandated 30-day hold period. They recovered the gold tennis bracelet, one of the cameo brooches, the emerald cocktail ring, and 3 of the smaller pieces from other shops. The strand of cultured pearls from the San Diego honeymoon had already been sold to a private buyer for cash through a side door and was not recoverable. 2 of the rings had already been sent out for meltdown. Ruiz pulled Brittany Carver's financial records under a court order signed by a Maricopa County commissioner. The deposits on her statements were small, scattered, irregular, and consistent in both amount and timing with the pawn proceeds. There was no concealment. There was no shell account. There was no second person involved. There was just a woman who had needed money and who had taken what was nearest to take. We're heading into the arrest now. If this case has held your attention this long, it's because the details deserve to be told properly, and because the woman it happened to could not tell them herself. Subscribe if you believe stories like Ellie Whitfield's deserve more than a 2-paragraph blurb in a local news write-up. We do this every week. We do it for the people who can't. Detective Ruiz applied for an arrest warrant on the afternoon of October 16, 2024. A Maricopa County Superior Court commissioner reviewed the affidavit and signed the warrant the same day. The warrant listed 3 charges: theft, under Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 13-1802. Theft from a vulnerable adult, under Section 13-1802, subsection B. And trafficking in stolen property in the second degree, under Section 13-2307. The arrest was scheduled for the following morning. Ruiz coordinated quietly with Janet Ortiz, the Sonoran Pathways compliance officer, who confirmed that Brittany was already scheduled to come into the agency's small administrative office on East Southern Avenue at 8:30 the next morning for a quarterly check-in and continuing education sign-off. The arrest would happen there, in a conference room behind the lobby, away from the Whitfield home, away from Ellie. Brittany arrived at the agency office at 8:34 a.m. on the morning of October 17th in a 2014 Nissan Sentra with a cracked back bumper and a small dent in the driver's side door. She was wearing a navy blue agency scrubs top with the company logo embroidered on the chest pocket, her hair tied back in the same low ponytail as in every counter photograph from every pawn shop, the same laminated agency badge clipped to her chest. She carried a small canvas tote bag with a stainless steel water bottle, a granola bar, and a Frozen-themed coloring book she had bought at the dollar store the night before to bring to Ellie that afternoon. She walked into the lobby and signed in at the front desk. 2 Mesa detectives in plain clothes were already waiting in the conference room behind the lobby. Janet Ortiz met Brittany at the sign-in desk and asked her to come back to the conference room for the check-in. Brittany said sure. She walked back. She sat down across the conference table from the 2 detectives, who stood up as she entered, introduced themselves by name and rank, and produced their badges from their jacket pockets. They placed 2 photographs on the table in front of her. One was a counter-camera image of the jade pendant from Desert Gold Exchange on July 11th. The other was a photograph of her own signature on the bottom of that same transaction receipt. Brittany looked at the photographs. She looked at the detectives. She did not say anything for almost 30 seconds. Her hands, which had been resting on top of her canvas tote, slid down into her lap and stayed there. The lead detective spoke first. His voice was even. "Brittany, is that your signature?" She said, "Yes." "Did you take this pendant from Eleanor Whitfield's home?" She said, "I want a lawyer." She did not say anything else. She was placed in handcuffs at 8:51 a.m. She was walked out the back door of the agency office, through a small employee parking lot, and into the back of an unmarked detective sedan to avoid the lobby and the other aides who had begun arriving for their own check-ins. She was transported to the Mesa City Jail on North Robson, booked at 9:43 a.m., and processed into a holding cell. Her booking photograph shows a woman who has not slept, who is not crying, and who is looking at a point on the cinder block wall behind the camera operator with the same flat, mildly resigned expression as in every pawn counter image. Sonoran Pathways. Home Care terminated her employment by certified letter that same afternoon. Her laminated badge was deactivated in the agency's electronic system at 2:14 p.m. The case file noted, in the cause of termination field, 3 words: theft from client. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office filed formal charges against Brittany Nicole Carver on October 21, 2024. The indictment listed 2 counts under Arizona Revised Statutes: theft from a vulnerable adult under Section 13-1802, subsection B, a Class 2 felony given the aggregated value of the property taken, and trafficking in stolen property in the second degree under Section 13-2307, a Class 3 felony. Brittany was assigned a public defender out of the Maricopa County Office of the Public Defender, a woman named Hannah Reyes, who had been practicing criminal defense in the county for 11 years and had taken roughly 24 elder exploitation cases to plea in that time. Reyes met with her new client in an interview room at the Estrella jail 2 days after the arraignment. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. By the end of it, Reyes had advised her, in plain language, to plead guilty and negotiate hard on the sentence. The evidence was, by any defense attorney's measure, overwhelming. 42 pawn transactions, 16 pieces physically recovered and matched to the insurance appraisal, a signature on every single receipt, a photograph of her at every single counter, a personal ledger on her own phone listing 6 of the items by date, item, and pawn price, a perfect overlay between her shift records at the Whitfield home and the transaction timestamps. The pawn shops were within a 15-minute drive of either the home or her apartment. There was no story she could tell on the witness stand that the paper trail would not contradict in writing. Reyes negotiated. The prosecution agreed in a written plea offer to consolidate the multiple trafficking transactions into a single combined trafficking count, to recommend the low end of the negotiated sentencing range, and to forego the additional aggravator under the Elder Exploitation Enhancement Statute that, if argued at trial and accepted, could have added an additional 5 years to her exposure. Brittany pleaded guilty on the morning of March 24, 2025, in a 5th-floor courtroom of the Maricopa County Superior Court at the Central Court Building on West Jefferson Street in Phoenix. She wore a gray sweater that the jail allowed her to change into for the appearance, and her hair was down for the first time in any photograph of her in the case file. She answered the judge's required allocution questions in a voice barely above a whisper. The judge, the Honorable Patricia Hallberg, a former prosecutor who had been on the criminal bench for 16 years, asked her, before formally accepting the plea, whether she understood the constitutional rights she was waiving by entering the plea. She said she did. The judge asked her whether she had, in fact, taken jewelry items belonging to Eleanor Whitfield from Eleanor Whitfield's home on the dates listed in the indictment. She said she had. The judge asked her whether she had, in fact, pawned that jewelry for cash at the licensed pawnbrokers listed in the indictment on the dates listed in the indictment. She said she had. Margaret Whitfield Donovan submitted a victim impact statement on her mother's behalf. Ellie was, by March of 2025, no longer able to write one herself. Her cognitive decline through the winter had been steeper than her neurologist had projected. She had been moved into a memory care unit at a facility in Tempe in late February. She no longer reliably recognized her daughter on the daily morning video calls. Margaret read the statement aloud in court at the sentencing hearing on April 18th. 2025. She stood at the lectern. She did not look at the defendant. She read, "My mother told me her jewelry was missing. I did not believe her at first. I thought it was the disease." The defendant in this courtroom was counting on exactly that. She chose my mother, specifically and on purpose, because she had calculated that my mother would not be believed by anyone, including by me. The rings she took were the ones my father picked out at a counter on East Camelback Road in 1968, with money he had saved from his first engineering paycheck. The bracelet she took was the one he gave her for 25 years of marriage. The pearls she took were from their honeymoon. These were not anonymous valuables. They were the only language my mother had left for a marriage she can no longer describe in sentences. the defendant did not just steal jewelry from an old woman. She stole the vocabulary of a marriage. She paused. She looked for the first time at the defendant. My mother does not know today that she is in a memory care unit. She does not know what state she lives in. She does not know what year it is. But on the morning she opened that empty cedar box and looked at me and said, plainly, "I told you they were missing." She was right. She was the clearest she had been in months. She was right, and she had been right for months before that, and we owed her our belief. I am sorry it took me as long as it did to give it to her. She sat down. Judge Hallberg accepted the negotiated plea agreement with one explicit modification. She imposed the high end of the negotiated sentencing range rather than the low end the prosecution had recommended. She sentenced Brittany Nicole Carver to 2.5 years in the custody of the Arizona Department of Corrections, to be followed by 3 years of supervised probation upon release. She ordered $15,000 in restitution to the Whitfield family, payable through wage garnishment for the balance of her supervised release period. She entered a separate court order permanently barring Carver from employment as a caregiver, a home health aide, a CNA, or any other role involving access to vulnerable adults anywhere in the state of Arizona for the remainder of her life. The conviction and the order were forwarded that same week to the Arizona Caregiver Registry, which flagged her name with a permanent disqualification, visible to every licensed agency in the state. Before she imposed the sentence from the bench, Judge Hallberg addressed the defendant directly. Brittany was standing at the defense table. Her hands were folded in front of her. She was looking at the floor. Ms. Carver, you were placed inside this woman's home because her family trusted that a state-licensed agency would send them someone who could be trusted. You were given a key to her front door. You were given a badge with your name on it. You were given unsupervised access to a person who, by clinical definition, could not protect herself from you. You did not lash out in a single moment of poor judgment under pressure. You returned to that house day after day for 4 months with a ledger on your phone. You chose her because of her illness. That is the part of this case that this court cannot move past, and that is the part this sentence is built around. Brittany Carver was transported to the Arizona State Prison Complex at Perryville, the state's women's prison facility in Goodyear, the following week. She is housed in the Santa Maria unit, minimum custody, with a projected release date of April 2027. She is working in the prison kitchen for 30 cents an hour. The garnishment order against her future post-release wages remains active for the next 8 years. Ellie Whitfield died in her memory care unit in Tempe on the morning of June 9, 2025. She was 80 years old. She had not been told about the arrest. She had not been told about the plea. She had not been told about the sentence. She did not live to see the first restitution check arrive at her daughter's house. She did not know one was coming. The wedding ring, the small round diamond, and the 2 channel-set sapphires that Walter Whitfield had picked out at a jewelry counter on East Camelback Road in the late spring of 1968, was returned to Margaret Whitfield Donovan in a sealed manila envelope from the Mesa Police Department property room 3 days after her mother's funeral. Margaret wears it on her right hand now. She does not take it off. That case was difficult to sit with, but the case waiting on the right-hand side of your screen right now might be even harder to believe.